All right, in this one, I want to talk about contact sports, more specifically boxing, and its effects on mental health. So, I want to talk about two studies, this one and this one. And the first one is lower quality technically. However, the results are pretty in line with the research and the higher quality data. So, in this one, mindfulness based non contact boxing therapy for depression and anxiety, one of the limitations was a low sample size, for example. They tried to do mindful boxing. I'm going to comment on that later. And in the end of the sessions, they did 10-minute meditation. Boxing is one of those things where you have to be mindful to do it. So it doesn't really matter if people force you to be mindful or not. You have to be mindful. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do it. You have to be 100% focused. If you're walking or if you're running slowly, you can still overthink. You can still have negative thoughts. You can still ruminate, but you cannot do that with boxing. So high intensity sports like boxing, they completely force you to be in a flow state. You cannot think about negative thoughts. It's impossible, especially if you're doing sparring. So contact sports, or in this case, boxing, is amazing if you want mindfulness, if you want to be in the present moment and to train that state and to not ruminate, not have negative thoughts. And that's amazing for that. And of course, they did meditation at the end, which also helps. Boxing has been shown in a bunch of studies to decrease the activity of the amygdala on a baseline level and to increase prefrontal cortex activation and to increase the regulation of the amygdala, which is done by the prefrontal cortex. So it makes you more capable of managing your thoughts, especially negative thoughts. So instead of you being controlled by the amygdala, by the fear and uncertainty part of the brain, it makes you actually better at controlling those thought patterns, which is pretty cool and pretty important if you want to reduce depression and anxiety. So in this study, they observed a 54% decrease in depression scores and 51% decrease in general anxiety scores, which is insane. They also saw an increase in mindfulness, a decrease in distress, and a decrease in BMI. And like I said, the study did have limitations. However, these results are pretty in line with the research, especially with mindful research. So depression scores 54% lower and anxiety 51% lower. And that's insane. And that makes sense because it's cardio, team-based cardio, as well as meditation. And so it makes sense that we have these insane results. There's also this study that I want to go over. It is technically higher quality, but they don't give you specific percentages when it comes to outcomes of depression and anxiety. But they did see that non-contact boxing exercises improved anxiety, depression, PTSD, and schizophrenia, as well as improved mood, improved self-esteem, confidence, concentration, metabolic health, strength, and coordination, which is pretty insane. That's a pretty big list of benefits. If you go look at the paper and the studies they analyzed, you can see a pretty big list of positives. So reduction in anxiety, for example, an improvement in social development, so social life, less rumination, so less thinking of negative thoughts, less stress, and also a sense of purpose and community, which people nowadays really lack. And this one's pretty interesting. They saw that people became less aggressive as a baseline. So you become more aggressive temporarily because you're boxing, you have to, but then you become a less aggressive person as a baseline, which is pretty cool. So it decreased aggressiveness, it increased feelings of calmness, and it increased confidence as well as performance in school in another study. And again, the list of benefits is just insane. And in another study, it reduced body fat percentage by quite a lot. It also shows benefits for PTSD, so trauma, and some of these are already repetitive, which is improvement in social skills, less aggressiveness, increase in confidence, etc. So that's pretty cool. That's a massive list of benefits. And I had no idea that contact sports were that positive. So if you want to do cardio, but you keep skipping it because you think it's boring, then you should probably do a cardio that is group-based. So for example, football or basketball or tennis or contact sports like boxing. And boxing has other benefits. For example, it forces you to be in a flow state, which reduces rumination. So maybe you don't like boxing, maybe you prefer basketball or football or something like that. But boxing, especially if it's non-contact boxing, it has a ton of mental health benefits. And it's just a massive list. So if you want to improve depression and anxiety, maybe you can join a fight club. And to be honest, I'm quite intrigued. I kind of want to try myself because I do have that problem where I want to do cardio, but every single time I try it, for example, running along the treadmill, I just find it boring and I cannot stick with it. So I might try to join a fight club, and I do want to try it and try contact sports because if it's in a group, the probability that you're going to stick with it is much, much higher. And solo cardio has way higher dropout rates. Not only that, you have the benefits of social life, including others. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think it's pretty interesting and I'm pretty impressed. And also, if you want to optimize your health, you can join the school community. It's the first link in the pinned comment. I really hope you join. The price will increase at 25 members. And yeah, join if you're interested about optimizing your health. And thank you so much for watching.